Hello everyone, good evening all. Welcome to BAJIRAO IAS Academy, the Hindu News Analysis. Today we have few very important news articles and we will discuss all those news articles. But before discussing those news articles, let's try to solve the yesterday's given practice question. So yesterday's question was Sakhi, a multi-purpose app. It was in news recently and it was developed by which of the following agencies? I have given you 4 agencies. First agency was National Informatics Center, National Crime Records Bureau, Vikram Sarabhai Space Center and Bureau of Indian Standards. So the correct answer for this question is Vikram Sarabhai Space Center. So 2 days back in our previous lecture, I have explained you what does this Sakhi means. So we know that ISRO has been planning to launch Gaganyaan mission into the space. We also know that this is India's first human space flight program, which is planning to launch its 3 astronauts or Vyomanauts into the low Earth orbit. So therefore, this particular Sakhi multi-purpose device would help astronauts communicate with each other. And it would also help them understand their diet, their health conditions, everything. So therefore, the Sakhi is a multi-purpose device and that is being developed by the Vikram Sarabhai Space Center. So let's discuss today's practice question. So today's practice question is, which of the following states Eagle Nest Wildlife Sanctuary is located? So options are A. Assam, B. Sikkim, C. Arunachal Pradesh and D. Manipur. So please try to answer this question in the comment section. Now let's discuss few important news articles. We will start with first important editorial, that is Water, an Instrument to Build World Peace. Now what is the context of providing this particular editorial in the newspaper? So there's a context. The context is that today is World Water Day. Okay, so annually or every year the World Water Day is observed in March 22 and it is observed since 1993. However, the overall objective of observing this World Water Day is to raise awareness about the freshwater resources. We all know that the existing freshwater resources are either degraded or depleted through pollution. Okay, so pollution of the freshwater resources and over extraction of the freshwater resources and extensive use of these groundwater resources for the agricultural purposes, thereby contaminating them, polluting them, have been making the existing water resources scarce. So therefore, countries like India would face the threat of water stress, severe water stress. Because of that reason, and in order to increase awareness about the freshwater usage among the people, the World Water Day is observed on March 22 every year. Apart from that, the theme of this year World Water Day is Water for Peace. Okay, so this is the theme of this year's World Water Day. So this particular World Water Day theme has been underscoring the significance of water and maintaining peace and stability globally. So it is important that we need to maintain peace and stability globally, and how water plays an important role in maintaining peace and stability across the world. So that is discussed in this editorial in a detailed manner. Now first try to understand some challenges of water crisis, how water crisis results in some of the most challenging issues. First and foremost, there are multifaceted challenges that we have been facing. When I say multifaceted challenges, they include rapid urbanization. We have seen rapid urbanization, even though rapid urbanization, but it is unplanned and also haphazard urbanization, and that is a concern. And now cities like Bengaluru have been facing severe water stress because of this unplanned haphazard model of urban planning. And after that, industrialization is also a concern. Now industries have been extracting the water resources and they are using the water resources but not recycling the water resources. Rather, they are contaminating and polluting the existing freshwater resources through industrial effluents. So therefore, industrialization is also one of the key concern which has been posing severe challenges to existing freshwater resources, because these industries have been contaminating the freshwater resources. And after that, we should also talk about the unsustainable nature of agriculture sector. Okay, so agriculture sector is also becoming unsustainable. When I say unsustainable, that essentially means that agriculture sector has been using fertilizer and it has also been using pesticides. So through the agriculture runoff, these fertilizer and pesticides have been contaminating the existing freshwater sources, because these contain some of the nutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium, sulfur. So when they are mixed with the water resources, or when they are mixed with the water bodies, they increase the nutrient content in those water bodies. So increasing nutrient content in those water bodies means increasing the growth of algae and even the algal blooms. So when there will be higher growth of these unwanted species in an aquatic system, on their death, decomposition requires more and more oxygen, and that depletes the existing dissolved oxygen, thereby deteriorating the health of an ecosystem. So that is how this particular agricultural activities have also been challenging, posing a challenge to the existing freshwater resources and creating water stress. So after that, climate change also contributing for the global warming. We all know how climate change has a multifaceted impact on the water resources. And after that, how water has been impacting the peace and stability, not just in India or not just within the region, but across the world. So 17 countries have been facing extremely high water stress as of now. So there are different countries, for example, countries in Africa, Latin America. So they have been facing severe water stress or severe water crisis. And that has been threatening peace and stability in those countries. Because when you have a very limited water resources, people starts competing for those water resources. And that ultimately disturbs the peace and stability in those regions. And this is cited by World Resources Institute. Now after that, India has also been facing extreme water scarcity. So we all know that how India has been facing extreme water scarcity, because agriculture sector itself has been depleting or extracting around 90% of India's groundwater resources. And when Indian agriculture extracting highest amount of groundwater resources, they just contaminating these groundwater resources with fertilizers and pesticides, so they no longer be potable. Okay, so therefore India also faces a severe water crisis or water stress, and this is being evident from water crisis in Bengaluru and water crisis in Chennai that recently took place. However, the projections have been indicating that a further decline in the availability of water by 2025 and 2050. So these projections have been indicating that India will face severe water stress or water crisis in future up to 2050 also. Now, let's try to discuss the impacts on ecosystem and agriculture because of the water scarcity or water stress or unscientific extraction and usage of these water resources. So firstly, it leads to the ecosystem disruption. How it will leads to the ecosystem disruption? Because water scarcity very often disturbs ecosystem functions, right? So it very often disturbs the ecosystem, the existing ecosystem functions. Right? For example, animals require water for their sustenance. So when they do not have adequate amount of water resources in their natural habitat, they generally come out of their natural habitat, and that very often leads to the animal-human conflict, human-wildlife conflict. You can write any of that. We all know that how elephants and train collisions have been taking place. How elephants and other animals have been coming out of their natural habitats, right? So therefore, it particularly jeopardizes food and water scarcity and ultimately undermining the peace as well. Because the forest ecosystem also depends on the availability of the water resources, and if we do not have the higher amount of water resources, it will also degrade the forest ecosystem. And apart from that, it will also threaten the agricultural sustainability. Please understand, when we talk about agriculture sector, so the agriculture sector, Indian agriculture sector has becoming water intensive sector, and we have still not adopted micro irrigation practices at a large scale because of small land holding size. So since we have small land holding size, we still not adopted the micro irrigation practices, and still we have been flooding the fields with the water. So that is unscientific irrigation. So therefore that has been leading to the depletion of existing groundwater resources. This is true that it has been leading to the depletion of existing groundwater resources, and it has also been creating problems of water stress and water crisis in cities like Bengaluru and even Punjab. So why Punjab? So Punjab, we all know that the first green revolution was started in Punjab and Haryana. So after first green revolution, the farmers in Punjab have been started extracting the groundwater resources in an indiscriminate manner. So that leads to severe water crisis in Punjab and Haryana as well. And that in future would also pose severe challenges to the agricultural sustainability also. Because when we lack adequate water to irrigate our fields, so that would also jeopardize our food security. Because for growing population, we need to ensure food security. So if we cannot sustain the agriculture by irrigating our fields, how can we ensure food security for our populations? And that is the major question. So after that, the vulnerability of rain-fed regions should also be discussed. So there are certain regions in our country, so they are primarily dependent on rainfall because they do not have adequate irrigation facilities to irrigate those fields. So when they do not have the irrigation facilities, they are dependent on rainfall itself. Okay, so therefore, when we receive lesser rainfall because of the impact of the climate change and the recurrent rainfall, failure of monsoons, so those regions would become uncultivable, right? Over a period of time, those regions would not be suitable for the cultivation. And they are also very crucial for the agricultural output, and they are very often vulnerable to water scarcity, and that impacts overall food production. And not just food production, here we need to talk about the livelihood security of the farmers. Livelihood security of the farmers is also a very important factor when we talk about the rain-fed areas, which primarily dependent on the monsoon. So what are the implications? No doubt that we have been facing water crisis, and what will be the other implications with respect to this water crisis? Now, when we talk about India's water crisis, so rapid urbanization or very often unplanned urbanization, industrialization, and unsustainable agricultural practices and climate change, all those factors have been contributing for the water scarcity in India, and those factors we have already discussed. However, apart from that, the World Resources Institute, India is categorized as a water stressed, with projections indicating further reduction in total water availability in India. So World Resources Institute has been saying that India would face water stress or water crisis in future as also. Okay, so groundwater depletion is also another major challenge that we have been facing. Okay, so as I have already told you, 90% of the groundwater is extracted by the agriculture sector alone, and remaining water resources are being used by industries and domestic purposes. So therefore, we do not achieve water use efficiency in the agriculture sector. Water use efficiency in the agriculture sector, and that water use efficiency is very important. However, the groundwater depletion is a severe concern in many leading states. Okay, so the groundwater depletion is a major concern in many states. For example, Punjab, Haryana. In those states, groundwater depletion is a major problem. And that also have several negative consequences, such as reduced agricultural productivity and ecosystem degradation and the social tensions among the people. Because when we have a lesser resources, there will be more competition for those lesser resources, and people starts competing for those resources, and that ultimately disturbs peace in an area. And at the same time, how it disturbs the ecosystem, because water cycle in an ecosystem plays a very important role. When water cycle is got disturbed, then we can expect scanty rainfall or erratic rainfalls, and that ultimately have impact on the flora and fauna. After that, the agricultural productivity, because in India, most of the agriculture is rain-fed agriculture. We do not have robust or strengthened irrigation facilities. So therefore agricultural productivity would also gets impacted by this. Okay, so after that there are instances like depletion of groundwater table in Bengaluru. So because of that reason, Bengaluru has been facing the severe water crisis now. Okay, so there were no attempts that were being made by the urban local bodies to recharge the groundwaters, to harvest the rainwater, to increase awareness among the people about the careful use of these water resources. If urban local bodies have acted in a timely manner, now Bengaluru would not have faced this particular problem. Okay, so therefore major cities should learn from Bengaluru, should learn a lesson from Bengaluru, and they start acting on that particular front. So therefore they will not face any major water crisis in future, because we have unplanned urbanization and rapid urbanization. There is a need that these cities must act at a faster pace. However, how this water stress or water crisis has been impacting the global peace? Because I've already told you that there's lesser resources and more competition, and that disturbs peace and stability in the region. So water scarcity very often poses threat to peace and stability in a region, because as we are seeing this in 17 major countries which are facing severe water stress or water crisis. Okay, so therefore competition over limited water resources would exacerbate tensions and leading to conflicts and unrest in those regions. So if India has not acted on a timely manner with respect to the conservation and harvesting of these water resources, India would also face such tensions and conflict that India cannot afford. So therefore India must act on this front as quickly or as early as possible. Now we can promote water security and water peace by certain measures. First and foremost, we need to focus on raw water harvesting techniques. Okay, so rainwater harvesting is very important. When we harvest the water and when we store the water to recharge the groundwater tables, so that will not create water stress or water crisis in any unit. So therefore this has to be focused on implementing rainwater harvesting techniques, both in situ and ex situ rainwater harvesting techniques. So in situ means on that specific site itself, for example individual rainwater harvesting, and ex situ techniques means a community rainwater harvesting techniques, those things. And both in situ and ex situ crucial for augmenting water resources. We need to augment the existing water resources. So that is very important. Through that particular method we can protect ourselves from the water stress or water crisis. And at the same time we need to enhance our resilience against the drought and water scarcity. So due to climate change we have been facing challenges such as drought and water scarcity. So in order to address these challenges, we must conserve water resources through rainwater harvesting. However, this particular initiative or this particular approach of harvesting the rainwater can be utilized with the programs like per drop more crop and गाँवों का पानी गाँवों में. So those schemes under the Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana will help harvest the rainwater, and that is very important for a country like India. And in this regard the government has undertaken certain initiatives to conserve the rainwater or to ensure that India will not face water stress and the existing water resources are used in a more sustainable manner. So what are those initiatives that are being launched by the government? First and foremost, government's emphasis on water conservation and water management. So for this particular purpose, government has launched several programs. Earlier, the government has launched several programs for the purpose of water conservation and water management. So those programs include Mission Amrit Sarovar and also Jal Shakti Abhiyan. Okay, so this Jal Shakti Abhiyan will provide potable drinking water to every household in India. And at the same time, Mission Amrit Sarovar will also help in recharging the groundwater tables, and that are part of water conservation and water management. However, there is a need for comprehensive protocol for the revival of water bodies. So there is a need for a comprehensive strategy or a comprehensive protocol that revive the existing water bodies, and not just water bodies, ponds, lakes, those wetlands and those things, and that could address the underlying issues effectively, because when we have these water bodies, they continuously replenish the underground water resources, and at the same time they also provide essential ecosystem services, and that is very important to ensure a water cycle. That is very important to ensure that the balance is being maintained. Okay, so additional interventions were also undertaken in this regard. So what are those interventions? Implementing several measures such as groundwater monitoring, regular groundwater monitoring, so that appropriate interventions can be taken with respect to recharging the groundwater, and water quality reclamation, efficient irrigation techniques that are being undertaken, community awareness campaigns, and promoting water neutral practices. So all those practices are considered essential for ensuring long-term water security and fostering the peace at the different levels. However, the community water management, community awareness, individual awareness is very important to conserve and save precious water resources. The efforts in this regard must be supported by the government initiatives and government finances, so that India will not face severe water crisis that we have been facing today in cities like Bengaluru and Chennai. Okay, so that's all in this particular editorial. And next important editorial is with respect to nuclear energy and fixing the finance. So please understand, since we have the ambitious targets such as becoming net zero by 2070, we all know that India has a target of becoming net zero, a carbon neutral by the year 2070. And apart from that, we also plan to significantly reduce our dependence on the fossil fuels. However, on the other hand, when we talk about the renewable fuels such as green hydrogen, solar, wind, they are highly capital intensive, first thing. Okay, so they are highly capital intensive, and at the same time they are also technology intensive, and at the same time they are a long term projects. Okay, so it takes time to realize the potential from those projects. So because of that reason, countries like India have been now focusing on nuclear energy, because nuclear energy can be one of the sustainable alternative to the fossil fuels in generating electricity, because they are more efficient in generating electricity, and because of that reason countries have been focusing on nuclear energy. Now in this regard, we will understand this nuclear energy and fixing finance and why this is in news. First and foremost, we need to understand this, why it is in news. It is in news because recently Belgium capital Brussels hosted the first ever nuclear energy summit. So please remember, Belgium capital Brussels has hosted the first ever nuclear security summit, or nuclear energy summit, because nuclear security summit was already held before, right? So this nuclear energy summit was co-chaired by the Prime Minister of Belgium, and at the same time the Director General of International Atomic Energy Agency. Right, so therefore in this context we will understand few things in this particular editorial. So those things are, first, nuclear energy summit. What is this nuclear energy summit and what is the purpose of this nuclear energy summit? And secondly, we will understand the financing mechanisms to construct or to build these nuclear power plants. And third, we will also understand the cooperative funding models and what is India's stand with respect to the nuclear energy also. Remember, this topic is very important. Okay, so therefore please pay attention to this. So this nuclear energy summit is held in Brussels, capital of Belgium. So this summit is actually an initiative in collaboration with International Atomic Energy Agency's Atom for Net Zero program. So please understand, Atoms for Net Zero program. So this is in line with what I have explained you earlier. I have explained you earlier that the countries have been looking to phase out the fossil fuels, and the alternative would be renewable energy resources. However, renewable energy resources have certain shortcomings or drawbacks. So in order to overcome those drawbacks and in order to phase out the fossil fuels, we can use atomic energy to produce electricity, and atomic energy can drive our economies, or atomic energy can help our economies make a transition towards the net zero. Okay, so this Atoms for Net Zero program is an initiative of International Atomic Energy, so please remember this. So this Atoms for Net Zero is an International Atomic Energy Agency's initiative, so that supports the efforts of the member countries to harness the power from the nuclear energy in the transition to the net zero. Okay, so for example, if any country has been doing any efforts with respect to harnessing or tapping nuclear energy from these nuclear power plants, and this International Atomic Energy Agency's initiative Atoms for Net Zero will support the efforts of those countries. Followed by that, we all know that this COP27 summit, the Conference of Parties Summit of United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, okay, FCC, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, COP27. So in this particular summit, this initiative provides decision makers with a data-driven energy scenario modeling. So it has provided the decision makers with certain data with respect to the nuclear energy and its overall potential to take a better decisions. Now in this context, what is the need to think about the atomic energy or nuclear energy? First and foremost, please understand the United Nations Climate Change Conference COP28 that was held in Dubai, United Arab Emirates. Okay, COP28 of United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change was held in Dubai. So that was held in December 2023, and this particular COP28 has stated that so there will be an indispensable role for the nuclear energy in meeting the climate goals of different countries. Okay, so nuclear energy can play a very significant role to those countries in making a transition towards the greener economies. Okay, so this is what the COP28 Conference of Parties 28 has identified about the potential of nuclear energy. However, this particular declaration was signed by around 22 world leaders, mentioned in the need to triple nuclear energy capacity by the year 2050. Okay, so the world leaders have been looking to double the nuclear energy capacity by the year 2050, the existing capacities, because nuclear energy has certain advantages. So what are those advantages? Nuclear power emits 4 times less carbon than solar farms or other renewable sources such as wind, hydrocarbon and the geothermal sources. Okay, so its carbon footprint is very low, very low. So because of this reason, countries have been focusing on the nuclear energy, because if we burn fossil fuels releases carbon, and carbon is a greenhouse gas, and that increases global temperatures. So that will lead to the global warming. Okay, so that will lead to the global warming. So similar to this, okay, so similar to this, when you talk about the nuclear energy, so it doesn't release a significant amounts of carbon, or we can say that less carbon than solar farms or other renewable sources such as wind, hydropower and geothermal, and because of that reason countries have been looking towards the nuclear energy. And apart from that, the nuclear power has the capacity to supply uninterrupted energy. So it can supply uninterrupted energy continuously because it has a higher efficiency of supplying this particular energy. Because of that reason, it provides uninterrupted supply of energy irrespective of geographical constraints. So therefore making it one of the crucial component for the wider renewable energy mix. Okay, so when we talk about the renewable energies, we should also think about the this particular nuclear energy. So there are two key motives for large scale adoption of the nuclear power as base load energy, source, technology and finance. So we need to talk about technology and finance when we are talking about the nuclear energy. So when I say technology and finance, what are the models to finance or to develop technology for the nuclear energy? Recently, there were developments in nuclear technology that includes small modular reactors and SMR and radiation proofing in existing plants. Okay, so radiation proofing in existing plants means they emit lesser amounts of radiation or they will not emit radiation. So that is the recent development. And small modular reactors. So these small modular reactors require lesser space. Okay, so therefore it requires lesser space, lesser investment, and they can be set up at any location. So thereby generating electricity at a sustainable scale. And at the same time, the extended fuel cycles as well. So they have the potential to substantially mitigate the nuclear related risks that are being associated. And because of that reason, countries are reluctant to set up nuclear power plants. Okay, so however, the developments are welcome developments in this regard. So however, in spite of the technical advancements in this field, several multilateral banks are not ready to finance the nuclear power plants. Okay, so multilateral development banks and even private investors have not made any significant contribution to the industry. In fact, multilateral banks like World Bank have also not financed, any significant nuclear power projects. So therefore, there is an alternative, that is cooperative model to finance nuclear energy. Okay, what does this cooperative model of financing nuclear energy means? So there are successful financial practices. So those financial practices can be replicated. For instance, cooperative funding measures that were adopted in countries like France, South Korea, Russia and UK. So this cooperative financing model actually helps in further further overcoming the financing constraints. So in this model, a group of investors raise credit from the market and take full responsibility for the project delivery. Okay, so they will take a full responsibility for the project delivery, and a group of investors will come forward and they will invest for this nuclear power projects. For example, in Finland, large power plants have been funded by multiple private companies. So it has been taking place since 1970s and using a cooperative financing model called Mankala. So this particular Mankala cooperative financing model is being used by investors to credit the power plants, to construct the power plants. So under this particular model, companies jointly own the energy producers and at the same time share costs for building and operating plants. However, for those investors, dividends will not be shared with them. Okay, so rather than providing dividends, the energy will be distributed across all those investors based on their shareholding. So they can sell the energy resources. Okay, so that's the cooperative funding model. And what is the scenario of nuclear energy in India? Okay, so reasons for low adoption of nuclear energy. So there are certain reasons. First, the stigma that is being associated with this nuclear power plants and nuclear weapons, all those things, especially the Hiroshima and Nagasaki atomic weapon attacks. So after that, the weaponization risk. There are certain rogue countries which can potentially use this nuclear energy for other purposes such as weaponization. And radiation leak is also a major concern because radiation would contaminate the environment, the soil, air and other important resources. Okay, so therefore it will have a huge impact on the environment, ecosystem and human health, and that is also concern. And there is lack of regulation and high upfront cost and even the long project overruns. All these are a major shortcomings with respect to the nuclear energy in India. So however, there are certain prospects also. When we talk about the prospects, the nuclear industry has been undergoing the novel liberalization in different countries. And countries also have the ambitious plans for growth in India and abroad. Because now nuclear energy would be an alternative for countries to achieve their net zero targets, and not just net zero targets, but even the intended nationally determined contributions also. So after that, beginning with the invitation of 26 billion in private investment, a phase-wise a tripling of nuclear capacity from existing 7,480 megawatts to 22,480 megawatts by 2031-32, and core loading of the prototype fast breeder reactor all mark a positive future for the industry in India. So however, we are optimistic with respect to the nuclear energy. So the image that you are seeing here, there are different nuclear power plants in different states in India. Okay, so next important article is with respect to the Great Indian Bustard. Great Indian Bustard. So it is one of the largest bird species that are native to India and parts of Pakistan. Okay, so Indian subcontinent. So there was a panel to study the altering power lines for the bustard habitat. Okay, so we know that the bustard is mostly found in states like Gujarat, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, and parts of Karnataka and even Andhra Pradesh. So however, setting up power lines have been becoming a major concern. Okay, so setting up power lines across the Great Indian Bustard habitat has becoming a major threat for these Great Indian Bustard. So that very often leads to the death, and because they have been facing a threat of extinction, because IUCN says that they are critically endangered species now, critically endangered species, and in wild they have less than 120 or 140 populations, and if this particular electrocution will lead to the further extinction of these animals. Now please understand the context. As per studies conducted by the Wildlife Institute of India, there are around 150 Great Indian Bustards left across the country, which include 128 birds in Rajasthan and less than 10 birds in each of these states in Gujarat, Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka. So because of that reason, it is very important that we need to protect the Great Indian Bustard. Okay, so the Great Indian Bustard species, now a few basic things about this particular bird species. So I've already told you it is a critically endangered species in India with less than 150 birds as per the Wildlife Institute of India. And also understand it is one of the heaviest flying birds that found in India. And third, so experts have been saying that only two districts in Rajasthan, Jaisalmer and Barmer, have a breeding Great Indian Bustard populations in the wild. So only few districts or only two districts have this Great Indian Bustard breeding population centers. So the bird can also be found in a very small numbers in other states also, Andhra Pradesh, Maharashtra, Karnataka, Gujarat and Madhya Pradesh. So a image that you see here, a cartoon image, so that indicates that these Great Indian Bustards have been feeling sad that these high tension cables cause high tension only in our lives and not in the governments. So governments have not been taking any efforts to prevent the collisions of these Great Indian Bustard with the power lines, because that has been driving their extinction, that has been making their extinction faster. So we cannot see the Great Indian Bustard in wild if this population continues to deplete. So because of that reason, the government has been thinking over setting up power lines in the Great Indian Bustard habitat. However, the government has taken certain measures with respect to the conservation of Great Indian Bustard. So we will understand those measures. So a site for the establishment of conservation breeding center for the Great Indian Bustard has been identified in the Kota district of Rajasthan. Okay, so the conservation breeding center will undertake the breeding efforts of the Great Indian Bustard. So this project has been launched under the Habitat Improvement and Conservation Breeding of Great Indian Bustard, an integrated approach. So under this particular program, the breeding center, conservation breeding center was established. However, a satellite conservation breeding facility with an incubator, hatcher, chick, rearing and housing captive birds has been set up in Sam, Jaisalmer, Rajasthan. So apart from that, we also know that the Wildlife Protection Act 1972, it is included under the Schedule 1. So therefore it enjoys highest protection. Okay, so it also enjoys highest protection. So apart from that, when we talk about CITES, Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, so Great Indian Bustard is also prohibited from trading. And at the same time, Convention on Migratory Species, so this is included in the Annexure 1 species. Okay, so therefore it also enjoys highest protection. And these are certain efforts that are being launched. However, according to IUCN, the Great Indian Bustard has been listed as critically endangered species. Right, so this is critically endangered species, and setting up these electric lines is a concern for the sustenance and survival of these Great Indian bustards, and because of that reason the government has been thinking over setting up these cable lines. Okay, so that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much. And if you really like our work, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. Thank you.